My name is Simone, and at 30 years old, I finally understand what it means to be the black sheep growing up. My parents never missed a chance to compare me to my golden boy brother Tyler. Family dinners were performances where his achievements earned standing ovations while my efforts barely registered applause. Little did they know behind my quiet smile, I was building something that would change everything. The day I finally revealed my success, their perfect picture shattered, and for once their precious son had nothing to say. Before I share how I finally proved my worth to my judgmental family, let me know where you're watching from today. Don't forget to subscribe if you've ever felt underestimated. I grew up in a cookie-cutter suburban home just outside Boston. Our house was perfectly maintained, much like the image my parents worked tirelessly to project to the world. My father, James, was an investment banker who measured success in dollar signs and status symbols. My mother, Diana, a former beauty queen, turned successful real estate agent, valued appearances above all else. Together, they created a household where achievements were currency, and from early on, it was clear my brother Tyler had the monopoly. Tyler was 3 years older, and everything seemed to come easily to him. He was the star pitcher on his baseball team, maintained straight descends, as without breaking a sweat, and had a natural charm that made adults melt. My parents never tried to hide that he was their pride and joy. Tyler is just special, my mother would tell her friends during their weekly coffee gatherings at our house. Some children are just born with that spark. I would be setting out cookies for her guests, pretending not to hear how I apparently lacked whatever magical quality my brother possessed. While Tyler dominated sports fields and collected academic awards, I discovered different passions. I loved art writing and most of all computers. The first time I took apart and reassembled our old desktop at age 9, I felt a thrill that nothing else matched. But when I proudly showed my father what I'd done, he frowned. "Simone, please don't break expensive things. We just bought Tyler a new laptop for his straight A's." My 10th birthday crystallized the pattern that would define my childhood. I had worked for weeks on paintings for my school's art show, which happened to fall on my birthday. "We'll try to make it," my mother had said, but I already knew what that meant. Tyler had a championship baseball game the same afternoon. I stood alone next to my watercolor series, while other kids' parents took photos and gushed with pride. My art teacher gave my shoulder a squeeze. "These are remarkable, Simone. You have a gift." But the only validation I truly wanted never came. That evening, our house erupted with celebration for Tyler's game-winning home run. My birthday cake came out after his victory ice cream, almost an afterthought. "Make a wish, sweetie," my father said distractedly while reviewing Tyler's sports stats with a neighbor. I wished for invisibility, because being unseen when you're already overlooked seemed less painful somehow. I began spending more time in my room teaching myself coding, while the sounds of my parents cheering at Tyler's games drifted through my window. The internet became my teacher, and lines of code made more sense than family dynamics. There was clarity in programming that family life lacked: input, output, cause, and effect. If you wrote the code correctly, it worked. No arbitrary favoritism or shifting standards. In middle school, I won a regional technology competition with a simple app I'd created to help students organize homework. The local paper even ran a small article about it. I left it on the kitchen counter, hoping someone would notice. My mother used it as a coaster for her coffee cup. That night at dinner, they spent 20 minutes discussing Tyler's college prospects. He was 14. I learned to keep my achievements private. Sharing them only invited disappointment when they failed to generate the response I craved. It was easier not to try for their approval than to watch them strain to care. High school brought one significant bright spot: Miss Rodriguez, my computer science teacher. She recognized something in me that my family couldn't see. "You have an extraordinary mind, Simone," she told me, after I'd completed a coding project weeks ahead of schedule. "You see solutions where others see walls." Under her mentorship, I flourished academically, at least in subjects that mattered to me. I maintained decent grades across the board, but poured my real energy into technology projects. Miss Rodriguez even helped me apply for specialized summer programs and competitions. For the first time, I started building a resume of achievements, just not the kind my parents valued. Graduation day perfectly encapsulated 18 years of being second best. Tyler, returning from his first year at Yale, gave a surprise speech about coming home that had my mother dabbing at her eyes with monogrammed handkerchiefs. During the ceremony, when they called my name as recipient of a partial technology scholarship to State University, my father was checking his phone. At our joint celebration dinner, ostensibly for me, but functionally a welcome home party for Tyler relatives, clustered around my brother while I answered the same question repeatedly. State University, not going somewhere more prestigious. My mother overheard one such conversation and jumped in with practiced brightness. "Well, we're just happy she's going to college at all. Not everyone can be like Tyler." I learned to smile through the pain, while something hardened inside me, determination perhaps, or the simple will to someday prove them all wrong. The contrast between Tyler's college experience and mine couldn't have been starker. He attended Yale with our parents covering every expense: tuition, housing, and the best dorm meal plan textbooks, and a generous monthly allowance. My acceptance to State University with a partial technology scholarship was met with a talk about financial responsibility. "We've set aside college funds," my father explained during my senior year, "but with Tyler at Yale, we need to be practical. You'll need to take loans for the remaining tuition. It will teach you valuable lessons about money management." The lessons about my place in the family hierarchy had already been thoroughly taught. I moved into a cramped dorm room with cinder-block walls, while Tyler sent photos from his spacious suite with a view of the historic campus. Our parents established a Sunday night family call tradition that quickly became the Tyler Show. He would detail his classes, with prestigious professors, the connections he was making, and the exclusive social clubs recruiting him. When my turn came, I'd barely get through describing my computer science projects before my mother would interrupt. "That's nice, honey. Oh, did Tyler tell you about meeting the governor's son at that networking event?" Thanksgiving of my sophomore year marked a particularly painful memory. Extended family gathered at our house, and dinner conversation revolved around Tyler's summer internship prospects. My cousin asked what I was studying, and I briefly mentioned my growing interest in app development. My father chuckled, swirling his wine. "Our little underachiever. Not everyone can be academically gifted, right? At least, she's trying." The table went uncomfortably quiet before my aunt changed the subject. I excused myself to the bathroom and cried silently for 10 minutes before returning with a practiced smile. College wasn't all shadows, though. I found my people, particularly my best friend Aria, who saw me clearly from our first shared computer science lab. "You code like it's an art form," she said, watching me solve a problem our professor had called particularly challenging. "Everyone else is building functional structures, but you're creating architecture." Aria's friendship gave me the emotional safety I'd never had at home. We pulled all-nighters working on projects, dreamed up startup ideas, and shared our hopes for breaking into the male-dominated tech world. For once, I didn't feel like I was constantly being measured and found wanting. Professor Jackson became another pivotal influence during my junior year. After I submitted a particularly innovative project, he asked me to stay after class. This thinking is beyond undergraduate level, he said, tapping my proposal. Have you considered developing this further? With the right execution, this could be commercially viable. His encouragement planted a seed. I began sketching out a more ambitious version of my project, an app that used artificial intelligence to help small businesses optimize their operations in ways previously only available to corporations with massive IT departments. The potential excited me, but I kept it secret from my family, protecting this fragile new dream from their dismissal. That Christmas break, Tyler announced he'd secured a prestigious summer internship at a global consulting firm. My parents threw an impromptu party, inviting neighbors and friends to celebrate. My mother beamed as she refilled wine glasses. We always knew he was destined for greatness. 2 weeks later, I won first place in a regional technology competition with a prototype of my app idea. When I mentioned it during dinner, my mother said, "That's nice, dear. Can you pass the potatoes? Did we tell you Tyler's firm might offer early placement for after graduation?" By senior year, the pattern was set in stone. Tyler's life warranted attention. Mine was background noise. His graduation from Yale became a family event. Grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, all made the trip. For mine only, my parents attended, and they left immediately after the ceremony to catch an early flight home for a neighborhood association meeting. As I watched them rush to their car, Aria placed a hand on my shoulder. Their inability to see your worth doesn't diminish it. Some people are so accustomed to looking at the sun, they've forgotten how to appreciate the stars. I held on to her words as I packed my apartment and prepared to enter the professional world, a world where my parents assumed I would continue to be mediocre. After graduation, I accepted an entry-level position at a mid-sized tech company in Boston. The salary was modest, but provided enough for me to rent a tiny studio apartment and continue developing my app idea during evenings and weekends. Meanwhile, Tyler landed a 6-figure consulting job at one of the big 3 firms, complete with a signing bonus that our parents couldn't stop mentioning. "Did we tell you about Tyler's company car?" my mother asked during one of our increasingly rare family dinners. "And they're already talking about fast-tracking him to management." I nodded and took another bite of food, having heard about Tyler's company benefits at least 5 times already. My father turned to me with what he probably thought was helpful interest. "And how's your little computer job going? Making enough to cover the bills?" "It's a software developer position, Dad. And yes, I'm doing fine." My mother reached across to pat my hand. "You know, Simone, you should think about finding a husband like your brother. Someone stable and successful. Not everyone can have a career like Tyler's, but you could still have a nice life." I nearly choked on my water. "I'm 22, Mom. I'm focusing on my career right now." "Of course, dear," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "It's good to be realistic about your prospects." A month later, Tyler called to announce he was apartment hunting in an upscale neighborhood. Our parents immediately offered to help with the down payment as an early inheritance allocation. When I mentioned looking for a better apartment myself, my father gave me a stern lecture about living within my means. "Be realistic, Simone. You're just starting out in an entry-level position. Tyler is different. He's on a fast track." Despite their lack of support, I maintained my day job while dedicating every spare moment to developing my app. My studio apartment became a makeshift office with whiteboards covering the walls and sticky notes, creating a colorful mosaic across my refrigerator. I lived on coffee and determination, often coding until 2 or 3 in the morning, before grabbing a few hours of sleep and heading to my regular job. The breakthrough came during a tech mixer event I almost didn't attend. Exhausted after a full week of work and late-night coding, I'd nearly talked myself out of going. But Aria insisted, and there I met Anthony, a venture capitalist with a background in artificial intelligence. Your concept is addressing a genuine gap in the market, he said, after I nervously pitched my idea. Small businesses are an untapped market for AI solutions. Most products are either too expensive or too complex for them. For the first time, someone with actual industry influence validated my vision. Anthony gave me his card and asked for a demo once I had a working prototype. I threw myself into development with renewed energy, sacrificing sleep and any semblance of social life. 3 months later, I had a basic prototype ready to show Anthony. We met at a coffee shop, and I anxiously watched as he tested the app on his tablet. His face revealed nothing until he finally looked up. The interface needs work, and there are performance issues, he said, and my heart sank. Then he smiled. But the core concept is solid. Fix these problems, and I think we might have something investable. I practically floated home only to crash back to earth when I checked my messages. My mother had called 3 times about Tyler's engagement to Melissa, the daughter of a prominent Boston family. The next few weeks became an exhausting blur of working my day job, refining my app at night, and being dragged to engagement celebrations where I was repeatedly asked when I was going to settle down like my brother. At the formal engagement party held at an exclusive country club, I stood in a corner, nursing a glass of champagne, while relatives I barely saw circled Tyler and his fiancée, like planets around twin suns. Both from Yale, both from good families, I overheard my aunt saying to my mother, "A perfect match." My mother nodded. We couldn't be prouder, though of course we hoped Simone might find someone suitable eventually. She lowered her voice, though not enough. Not everyone can be like Tyler and Melissa. Later that evening, as guests began to leave, my father found me on the terrace. I thought just for a moment that he might offer some rare words of encouragement or connection. Instead, he straightened my collar and sighed. "You could make more of an effort, Simone. Network, meet people. Tyler's connections could help you find a better position than that tech support job." "I'm a software developer, Dad, not tech support. And I'm actually working on—" Yes, your little side project," he interrupted. "Just don't pin too many hopes on it. The technology industry is very competitive." I returned to my apartment that night and stared at my code until the characters blurred. For the first time since starting my project, I questioned everything. Was I deluding myself? Was I really the underachiever they thought me to be? The next morning, disaster struck. A critical flaw in my prototype caused it to crash during a demo with a potential early user. The feedback was brutal, too unstable, too complicated, not ready for market. I felt like a fraud. That night, I called Aria in tears. Maybe they're right. Maybe I should just accept my place as the family disappointment and stop reaching. "Stop it," she said firmly. "Every entrepreneur faces setbacks. Your parents have conditioned you to give up at the first sign of struggle because it confirms their narrative about you. Prove them wrong, Simone. Not for them, for you." Her words struck home. I'd been coding and creating since childhood, pushing forward despite never receiving the support or recognition I craved. I'd come too far to surrender now. That night, I deleted the flawed prototype, a terrifying but necessary reset, and began rebuilding from scratch with a clearer vision. The family disappointment wasn't done yet. The failure of my first prototype became a disguised blessing. Starting over allowed me to rebuild with greater clarity and purpose, incorporating everything I'd learned from the initial attempt. I spent 2 weeks mapping out a completely redesigned architecture that addressed the fundamental flaws in my original approach. Anthony checked in periodically, and I was honest about the setback. "I'm starting over. The foundation wasn't sound." Rather than being disappointed, he seemed impressed by my determination. That takes courage. Most people would patch over problems rather than rebuild from scratch. 3 months of intensive work later, I had a new prototype that outperformed the original in every way. The interface was intuitive, the AI core more efficient, and the entire system designed with scalability in mind. When I demonstrated it to Anthony, his eyes widened. "This is a completely different league," he said, scrolling through the analytics dashboard. "You've addressed every concern I had, and then some." 2 weeks later, Anthony arranged a meeting with his angel investor group. I prepared, obsessively refining my pitch until I could deliver it in my sleep. The meeting itself passed in a blur of questions, demonstrations, and technical discussions. I left exhausted, but hopeful. The call came 3 days later. "They're in," Anthony said. "Not the full amount we asked for, but enough to give you runway for 6 months of full-time development." It was decision time. The investment wasn't enough to hire a team, but it would allow me to focus exclusively on the app if I lived frugally. Taking it meant quitting my stable job, something my risk-averse parents would consider madness. I invited them to dinner, hoping that sharing my opportunity might finally earn their support. I explained the investment, the potential of the app, and my decision to pursue it full-time. My mother's fork clattered against her plate. "You're quitting your job for some app that might never make money." "This is a legitimate investment from established angel investors," I explained. "They've vetted the concept and believe in its potential." My father shook his head. "Simone, be reasonable. You have student loans. You need stable employment. This sounds like throwing away security for a long shot." "Tyler took risks with his career," I pointed out. "You encouraged him." "That's different," my father said dismissively. "Tyler had Yale credentials and connections. He calculated risks from a position of strength." I left dinner with their warnings ringing in my ears, but my resolve intact. The following Monday, I submitted my resignation and committed fully to my company. The next months were a whirlwind of coding, testing, revising, and occasional moments of panic about my dwindling bank account. I worked 18-hour days forgetting to eat, unless Aria called to remind me. My apartment transformed entirely into a workspace, with my mattress pushed against the wall to make room for additional whiteboards. Tyler's wedding arrived during this period, an extravagant affair at a historic Boston hotel. I took 24 hours away from work to attend wearing a dress I'd found on clearance, and hoping no one would notice it wasn't designer. "Simone," my mother's college friend cornered me at the reception. "Diana tells me you're between jobs at the moment. Such a shame. Have you thought about going back to school? Maybe a master's would help?" Before I could respond, another relative joined us. "There you are. We were just wondering when you might follow your brother's example. Any special someone on the horizon?" "Actually, I've started my own technology company," I said, attempting to redirect the conversation. The response was a patronizing smile. "How nice. A little Etsy shop or something." I escaped to the bathroom, reminding myself that their opinions couldn't diminish what I was building. When I returned, I overheard my mother talking to a cousin. "At least one of our children makes us proud. Tyler has everything figured out, career, marriage. They're even talking about buying a house in Beacon Hill." I left the wedding early, returning to my apartment and throwing myself back into work with renewed determination. Their dismissal would fuel my fire rather than extinguish it. A month later, the first version of my app launched to a small pilot group of local businesses. The feedback was cautiously positive. Users found value in the core functionality, but suggested numerous improvements. I worked around the clock, implementing changes, sleeping on my couch, to save the 30 seconds it would take to walk to my bed. Thanksgiving arrived, and with it, another family gathering. I'd made significant progress, but wasn't ready to share it, yet the app was growing its user base steadily, but hadn't achieved the breakthrough moment I was waiting for. During dinner, my father stood to make a toast. We have much to be thankful for this year. Tyler's recent promotion to senior consultant after just 18 months is unprecedented at his firm. They recognize excellence when they see it. Glasses clinked around the table. No one asked about my work. Later that evening, my phone buzzed with a notification. Tech Insight, a respected industry blog, had published a review of my app. SmartOps might be the democratization of AI that small businesses have been waiting for, the article began. Created by former software developer Simone Walker, this tool brings enterprise-level optimization to the small business sector with remarkable elegance. I read the article 5 times, tears blurring my vision. Someone saw value in what I'd created. The validation I'd never received from family had come from the industry instead. The article generated interest. User signups tripled within days. Anthony called with news that several larger investors wanted meetings. Most surprisingly, a representative from Nexus Technologies, one of the largest enterprise software companies in the world, reached out to discuss partnership possibilities. The meeting with Nexus was scheduled for mid-December. I prepared extensively, knowing this could be transformative for my company. The discussion went beyond my expectations when their development director said something I hadn't anticipated. Rather than a partnership, we'd like to discuss acquisition possibilities. I nearly dropped my water glass. Acquisition. Your technology fills a gap in our product ecosystem. We've been trying to penetrate the small business market for years without success. Your approach is exactly what we've been missing. I left the meeting in a daze, with instructions to expect formal discussions after the holidays. For the first time, I allowed myself to imagine success on a scale I'd never considered possible. Christmas dinner brought another round of Tyler worship. He and Melissa arrived in matching cashmere sweaters, distributing expensive gifts and dominating conversation with stories of their luxury ski vacation. My mother turned to me during dessert. Tyler mentioned his firm is hiring administrative assistants. Nothing fancy, but it would be stable. Should he put in a word for you? I nearly choked on my pie. Mom, I have my own company. Yes, dear, your little app project. But don't you think it's time for something more reliable? Tyler could really help you get established? I smiled tightly. I'll keep it in mind. As painful as their dismissal was, I took comfort knowing that everything would change soon. The negotiations with Nexus were progressing rapidly, and the new year promised to bring the validation I'd been seeking my entire life. January arrived with momentum. Nexus Technologies moved quickly, scheduling intensive meetings with their acquisition team. I hired a lawyer specializing in technology acquisitions, an expense that made me nervous but proved essential as we navigated the complex negotiations. They're serious, my lawyer confirmed, after our third meeting. The offer will be substantial based on their level of engagement. I lived in a strange limbo during this period. My app continued gaining users and positive reviews, and the meetings with Nexus grew increasingly detailed. Yet to my family, I was still the underachieving daughter who refused to accept her limitations. I learned through the family grapevine that Tyler had lost his job in a corporate restructuring just before Christmas, but had kept it quiet. According to my cousin, who worked at a partner firm, the entire division had been eliminated due to changing market conditions. No one was at fault, but Tyler had carefully constructed a narrative of voluntary departure to protect his image. During our monthly family dinner in late January, the contrast between reality and perception was stark. My parents still spoke of Tyler as though his career were thriving while he nodded along, occasionally dropping vague references to consulting projects and exploring executive opportunities. My mother turned to me during coffee. "Simone, have you considered asking Tyler for career advice? He's navigated the professional world so successfully." I bit my tongue. "I'm actually quite busy with my company right now." "Yes, your little computer thing," she said dismissively. "But Tyler understands the bigger business world. His insights could be valuable for your resume when you decide to return to traditional employment." Tyler shifted uncomfortably in his seat, and for a moment our eyes met. For the first time I saw something new there, a flicker of shame or perhaps recognition of the facade he maintained. A week later, Tyler called me directly, something that rarely happened. After awkward small talk, he cleared his throat. "So this is a bit uncomfortable, but I'm in a temporary cash flow situation. The transition between opportunities, you know how it is." "What are you saying, Tyler?" "I was hoping you might be able to loan me a small amount to tide me over. Nothing major, just enough to cover the mortgage payment. Melissa doesn't know yet about the job situation, and I'd like to keep it that way until I land somewhere new." I was speechless. My golden boy brother was asking me the family disappointment for money. "How much do you need?" I finally asked. 15,000 would get me through the next month or two. I nearly gasped at the amount, but managed to keep my voice neutral. "Let me see what I can do. I'll need to check my finances." After we hung up, I sat staring at my phone. Part of me felt a vindictive satisfaction that the family golden child needed help from the perpetual underachiever. A larger part felt compassion. I knew what it was like to have your self-worth tied to external validation. Before I could decide about the loan, everything accelerated with Nexus. Their formal acquisition offer arrived complete with an 8-figure sum that momentarily made me dizzy and a leadership position heading their new small business division. The deal included an immediate payment plus performance-based incentives that could potentially double the amount over 3 years. After consulting with my lawyer and Anthony, I signed the agreement still in disbelief that my little app project had culminated in this outcome. A strict non-disclosure agreement prevented me from discussing specifics until the official announcement planned for the week after the annual family reunion dinner, an event my parents hosted every February to bring together extended family and close friends. The timing seemed almost poetic. After a lifetime of being overlooked, I would reveal my success in the setting where I'd felt most invisible. I processed a complex mixture of emotions in the days leading up to the dinner. There was pride in what I'd accomplished, vindication after years of dismissal, but also sadness for the support I'd never received. I wanted the revelation to be firm, but not vindictive. I had no desire to become the mirror image of my parents measuring worth through achievements alone. I decided to loan Tyler the money he'd requested, transferring it without fanfare or conditions. His shocked gratitude was followed by a question, "How can you afford this? Do you need it back immediately?" "Don't worry about timing," I told him. "Just focus on your situation." He didn't press further, but something in his voice suggested he was beginning to see me differently. As the family dinner approached, I prepared myself emotionally for the moment of revelation. I wanted neither to gloat nor to diminish what I'd achieved. Most of all, I wanted to reclaim my narrative, to finally be seen clearly by the people who had defined me by their limitations rather than my potential. The annual family reunion dinner always followed the same script. My parents' home would transform into a showcase of family accomplishments, with my mother orchestrating conversations to highlight success stories, particularly Tyler's. This year, despite knowing what was coming, I felt the familiar knot in my stomach as I parked on the street watching relatives arrive ahead of me. Tyler's luxury car pulled up a vehicle I now knew he could no longer afford, but kept to maintain appearances. He and Melissa emerged looking the part of the successful couple, though I noticed strain around his eyes that others might miss. From my vantage point, I watched the customary fuss as my parents greeted them. My father clapping Tyler on the back, my mother embracing Melissa while complimenting her designer dress. I took a deep breath, checked my appearance in the rearview mirror, and prepared to enter a scene where I'd always played a secondary role. I dressed differently than usual for family events, a subtle but significant upgrade to a well-cut pantsuit and quality accessories that reflected my new circumstances without being flashy. As I walked in, several relatives did double takes, but my parents barely glanced my way. "Simone, you're finally here," my mother said, checking her watch. "Everyone's already inside. We were about to start without you." The living room buzzed with conversation that quieted briefly as I entered, then resumed. My father was at the center of a group, gesturing expansively while describing Tyler's latest achievements, all fictional I now knew. Tyler himself stood nearby, smiling tightly, and occasionally nodding confirmation of details that weren't true. Dinner followed the established pattern. My mother had placed me at the far end of the table away from the center where my parents, Tyler and Melissa, sat with my father's business associates and my mother's closest friends. The seating arrangement had always been strategic, the family hierarchy made visible. Halfway through the main course, my father stood for his traditional toast wine glass raised. "I'd like to thank everyone for joining our annual celebration of family and success. As always, we have much to be proud of this year." He launched into a detailed account of Tyler's supposed career achievements, followed by praise for Melissa's charity work and their recent purchase of vacation property on Cape Cod, another fiction, given Tyler's financial situation. "Some people simply have that special quality," my father concluded, "that innate ability to excel. We've always been blessed that Tyler has that spark." Glasses clinked around the table. My father remained standing, apparently not quite finished. And of course he added with what he probably thought was generous inclusion, "Simone continues with her computer hobbies. We're sure she'll find her level eventually." Several relatives glanced my way with awkward sympathy. Tyler shifted uncomfortably, staring at his plate. Something in his discomfort gave me the final push I needed. "Actually," I said, my voice carrying clearly across the table, "I have some news to share." My mother quickly interjected. "Let's save any announcements for dessert, shall we?" Tyler was about to tell everyone about his new venture opportunities. Tyler cleared his throat. "I'm actually in a period of, career adjustment at the moment, exploring options." A confused silence fell over the table. My father jumped in. "What Tyler means is that he's being courted by several major firms. A bidding war, essentially." I took a deep breath. I've been waiting for the right moment to share my news, and this seems appropriate since we're all together. My mother's smile tightened. "Simone, dear, perhaps now isn't—" "Nexus Technologies has acquired my company," I stated clearly. "The deal closed last week." Blank stares met my announcement. My father frowned. "Your little app project, I'm sure that's very nice, but—" The acquisition was in the 8 figures, with additional performance incentives that could double that amount over 3 years. I'll be heading their new small business division. Complete silence fell over the table. My mother's wine glass stopped midway to her lips. Tyler's face registered shock. Then something that looked almost like relief. "That's not possible," my father finally said. "You must be exaggerating a small achievement." Wordlessly, I took out my phone and pulled up the press release that would go public the following week. along with documentation my lawyer had cleared me to share with family. I passed the phone to my aunt, who sat closest to me. "Oh my God," she whispered, scanning the information. "Simone, this is incredible!" The phone made its way around the table, expressions changing from disbelief to shock as each person viewed the evidence. When it reached my father, his face flushed, then paled as he read the details. "Why didn't you tell us you were working on something this significant?" my mother asked. Her voice strained with the effort of recalibrating her entire understanding of her children's positions. "I've been telling you about my company for years," I replied evenly. "You called it my little hobby and computer thing. You suggested I ask Tyler for career advice just last month." An uncomfortable silence settled over the table. My mother recovered first, her social training kicking in. "Well, we always knew you were bright. We've always supported your interests." "No, you haven't," I said quietly but firmly. "You've spent my entire life making it clear that I was the disappointment while Tyler was the success story. You've dismissed everything I've accomplished because it didn't fit your narrow definition of achievement." "Now, Simone," my father started, his voice carrying the authoritative tone he'd always used to end discussions that made him uncomfortable. "We've always wanted the best." "The best for Tyler," I finished. "For me, you've wanted adequacy at most. Enough success not to embarrass you, but never enough to challenge the family narrative." More silence. Relatives stared at their plates, witnessing the collapse of a carefully maintained family fiction. Tyler cleared his throat. "Since we're being honest," he said, voice unsteady, "I should admit that I was laid off 3 months ago. I've been pretending everything was fine because I didn't want to disappoint everyone." He looked at me. "The money Simone loaned me is keeping us afloat while I job hunt." My mother gasped. My father's face went from pale to red. "You asked your sister for money. Why didn't you come to us?" "Because I couldn't stand to see that look on your face, the one you're wearing right now," Tyler said. "The one that says, I've failed to meet expectations." "We would never think that," my mother protested. "You've thought it about Simone her entire life," Tyler countered. "Why would I be different if I stopped being perfect?" The dinner that had begun as a celebration of fictional success had transformed into a reckoning with painful truths. As the initial shock subsided, my father attempted to reframe the narrative. "We've always used tough love with Simone because we knew she needed the extra push," he claimed. "With Tyler, we could be more encouraging because he was naturally driven." "That's not tough love," I said. "That's favoritism dressed up as parenting strategy." The remainder of dinner passed in awkward conversation, with relatives attempting to congratulate me while my parents processed their shattered worldview. As people began to leave, I felt no triumph, only a bittersweet recognition that the validation I'd sought for so long had come not from my family's approval, but from my own determination to succeed, despite their doubt. When only immediate family remained, my mother approached me in the kitchen. "We're very proud of you, of course," she said, her voice brittle. "I don't know why you think we weren't supportive." "Mom," I said gently, "you literally suggested I apply to be Tyler's administrative assistant a month ago." She had no response for that. The aftermath of the family dinner revelation wasn't the cinematic moment of instant reconciliation that childhood fairy tales might suggest. My parents didn't suddenly transform into perfectly supportive figures, nor did years of established patterns disappear overnight. What followed instead was a messy, complicated period of readjustment as our family recalibrated around a new reality. 2 weeks of uncomfortable silence followed the dinner. I focused on my transition to Nexus Technologies, setting up my new division and adjusting to leadership responsibilities that stretched my capabilities. The work provided welcome distraction from family dynamics I wasn't yet ready to address. My mother broke the silence first, calling on a Tuesday evening with a voice that sounded smaller than I'd ever heard it. "I've been thinking about what you said at dinner," she began without preamble, "about us always favoring Tyler." I waited, giving her space to continue. "I want to say it isn't true, but—" Her voice faltered. "I've been looking through old photo albums. There are so many of Tyler's baseball games, school awards, celebrations, and you're often just in the background. I never noticed before." It was the closest thing to acknowledgement I'd ever received. "Thank you for seeing that now," I said carefully. "Could we have coffee sometime? Just the two of us." We met at a neutral location, a cafe, halfway between our homes. The conversation was difficult, with moments of defensiveness from my mother, followed by genuine attempts at understanding. We barely scratched the surface, but it was a beginning. My father took longer to reach out. When he finally called, his approach was more practical. "I've been following the news about your acquisition. Very impressive numbers." The stock market responded quite favorably to the announcement. It was his way of extending an olive branch, translating my achievement into the metrics he understood. "Thanks, Dad. It's been an intense transition." "Yes, well, these things always are." An awkward pause. "Your mother mentioned you two had coffee. Perhaps you and I could grab lunch sometime. I'd be interested to hear more about the technology aspects." Tyler's approach was the most direct. He appeared at my office unannounced one afternoon, looking both out of place and humbled. "Your assistant wasn't sure whether to let me in," he said, with a self-conscious smile. "Apparently, you're important enough to have a gatekeeper now." "Come in," I said, gesturing to a chair. "How are you doing?" He sank into the seat, glancing around at my spacious office with its view of the Boston skyline. "Honestly, I'm rebuilding, both my career and my understanding of myself." He met my eyes directly. "I've had a lot of time to think about our family dynamics since that dinner. And I owe you an apology. I benefited from their favoritism my entire life and never questioned it. Worse, I sometimes reinforced it because it was comfortable being the golden child." His candor surprised me. "I never blamed you for how they treated us," I said truthfully. "You didn't create the dynamic." "No, but I participated in it. I accepted the praise and privileges without ever acknowledging they came at your expense." He leaned forward. "I'm sorry, Simone, truly." We talked for 2 hours that afternoon, having our first real conversation as adults rather than as the roles we'd been assigned in childhood. He shared the humiliation of his job loss and the fear that had kept him pretending everything was fine. I told him about the years of working in shadows, protecting my dreams from familial dismissal. "I always thought you had it all figured out," he admitted. "The golden path laid out before you." "I always thought you were comfortable with their expectations," I countered. "I never realized they terrified you too." As the weeks passed, I established clearer boundaries with my parents. Our relationship would need to be rebuilt on new terms, ones that recognized me as the capable adult I was, rather than the perpetual disappointment they'd imagined. My mother suggested they see a family therapist, surprising me with her willingness to examine long-established patterns. "We've made mistakes," she admitted, during a particularly honest conversation. "I don't want to lose my relationship with you because we can't acknowledge that." 6 months after the Revelation dinner, we gathered again for a smaller family meal. The dynamics had shifted noticeably. My parents asked questions about my work and actually listened to the answers. Tyler spoke openly about his new position at a smaller firm, less prestigious, but more aligned with his actual interests rather than our parents' expectations. My father raised his glass for a toast, and I tensed instinctively, anticipating the familiar pattern. Instead, he simply said, "To new beginnings and seeing each other clearly. We're proud of both our children." It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. As my professional success continued, I found unexpected purpose beyond corporate achievement. I established a foundation supporting young people with interest in technology who lacked family support or traditional advantages. The program particularly focused on girls and young women facing barriers to entry in the tech field. During our first cohort's graduation ceremony, watching 20 young women demo their projects, I felt a deeper satisfaction than any acquisition figure could provide. These students reminded me of my younger self, full of potential that might have withered without encouragement. "Your story helped me keep going when my parents said technology wasn't for girls," one participant told me afterward. "Knowing someone else faced that doubt and succeeded anyway made me believe I could too." My relationship with my family continued its careful repair. There were still uncomfortable moments and old habits that occasionally resurfaced, but we were learning a new way of relating to each other, one based on who we actually were rather than who they'd decided we should be. Tyler and I developed a genuine sibling friendship that had never been possible within the competitive framework our parents had created. He eventually became an enthusiastic mentor in my foundation's program, finding purpose in helping others navigate challenges similar to those he'd faced. The journey taught me that validation sought from others is always conditional and ultimately unsatisfying. True worth comes from within, from building something meaningful, despite doubt, from persisting when recognition is withheld, from defining success on your own terms. The daughter they called useless built something no one expected, not just a successful company, but a life where I finally defined my own worth. Have you ever been underestimated by those who should have believed in you most? How did you handle it? Share your story in the comments below. And if this resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear that their worth isn't determined by others' limited perception. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, sometimes the people who see your potential the least clear the path for your greatest achievements.